This video will focus on challenging government actions that violate civil liberties, which are inherent rights within Canada's constitutional order. The core thesis is that these inherent rights are rooted in the constitutional structure, recognized by courts, and not dependent on legislative grant. They include liberty, expression, religion, assembly, property, bodily autonomy, and due process. The constitutional division of powers assigns authority to the federal parliament under Section 91 and provincial legislatures under Section 92. Municipalities have delegated authority, and civil liberties are not among the enumerated provincial powers. The jurisdictional principle asserts that when a law interferes with civil liberties, the issue is jurisdiction, not policy or balancing. A law enacted without proper authority is void. In the Reference Re Alberta Statutes case, the Supreme Court held that civil liberties are not provincial subjects and provinces cannot regulate freedoms. The law in question was struck down due to a lack of jurisdiction. The Alberta reference implies constitutional protection of liberties and limits on provincial power. Unconstitutional laws are void from the start, and municipalities share these same limitations. The case of Campbell Motors Limited versus Gordon established that civil liberties are inherent and inalienable, not originating in legislation. Government authority is derivative and therefore limited. The rule of law principle protects fundamental rights such as life, liberty, speech, religion, and property. In Switzman versus Elbling, it was determined that provinces cannot indirectly suppress expression. Licensing or property controls cannot be used to override fundamental freedoms. The Saumur versus City of Quebec case states that municipalities cannot license civil liberties. This applies to things like protest permits, worship limits, and speech zones. Roncarelli versus Duplessis highlights that officials have no arbitrary power, and personal liability is possible for rights violations. The Canadian Bill of Rights recognizes pre-existing rights, including life, liberty, security of person, property, and due process. The common law tradition grounds civil liberties in historical documents like the Magna Carta, the Petition of Right, and the English Bill of Rights, establishing limits on government power. Judicial recognition confirms that liberties are part of the constitutional structure. Canadian courts affirm that the government is bound by legal limits and that courts protect individuals. The secession reference identified fundamental constitutional principles, including the rule of law, constitutionalism, democracy, and the protection of liberty. The rule of law dictates that government must act within its authority, without arbitrary discretion, and courts must remain available to review government action. Governments are limited in their interference with life. They cannot arbitrarily threaten bodily integrity, compel medical intervention, or use administrative coercion. Limits on liberty mean authorities cannot lawfully restrict expression or religion, suppress peaceful assembly, or confine without due process. Authorities cannot arbitrarily seize or destroy property, restrict its use to suppress freedoms, or condition property on the surrender of rights. Unlawful administrative conversion of rights includes permit-based systems, replacing courts with administrative enforcement, and conditioning services on surrendering liberties. Unconstitutional actions can be challenged through legal remedies such as judicial review, constitutional declarations, injunctions, misfeasance claims, and personal liability actions. In conclusion, civil liberties belong to the citizen, government power is limited by law, and courts guard constitutional freedom. The final principle is that civil liberties are inherent rights, not privileges granted by the state, and government exists within legal limits.